The Chaser Report is recorded on Gadigal land.
Striving for mediocrity in a world of excellence. This is the Chaser Report.
Hello and welcome to the Chaser Report. Charles's news is that his show is apparently selling out in Edinburgh, and he very charmingly wrote on social media, "Suck shit," if you wanted to come. So he is insufferable. Fortunately, we have the much lovelier Andrew Hansen on today's show. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you, Dommy. Thank you. Look, I've learned a bit about sold-out shows on the festival circuit myself and how they work. It's an interesting claim, the sold-out show, because it's a way of selling tickets. I don't know. This is a bit of an inside story here that you might be interested in. But if your show hasn't quite sold out yet, then the best way to get it to sell out is you declare it sold out. You say it's sold out, and so a lot of shows, in fact, most shows, if they're 80% sold, they declare it to be sold out. And then people rush to book new tickets for the next night or wherever.
Oh, so they don't sort of go, whoops, 10 have suddenly become available. We've managed to squeeze more people in. They literally just go, okay, that's it. Sold out, empty, and then that just generates hype.
Yes.
So what happens to the audience who turns up and sees a whole bank of empty seats?
Yeah. Well, I suppose they'll assume that everybody caught a cold.
Yeah,
everybody. Every single person
couldn't make
caught
it.
a cold.
There you go. So, all right. Well, that gives me a sense of suspicion. Remembering Charles's maths on the Chaser newspaper subscription numbers, which I think wildly inflated. I mean, I think the statute of limitations has expired. We can say they were fraudulent now, can't we? Is that all right?
It's like that plot line from Succession, isn't it? The social media guy who pretends that his platform has way more users than it really does.
Oh, in India,
it's
that's
great
right.
marketing. I mean, we should do it for this podcast. How many listeners does this podcast have?
A billion.
40 billion.
Yeah.
Only 1 billion.
1 billion. No, that's just in Australia. That's just in Australia.
Of course. Yeah. The most listened to podcast.
All right, now look, there's an amazing story today. If Charles were here, he would want us to talk about the plan to flood Sydney with $7.5 billion worth of cocaine. Let's get into this in a moment. Now, Andrew, of course, you live in genteel Melbourne, where the addiction is to coffee and quality tailoring. None of this sort of cocaine business, but there's a gentleman, according to the Sydney Morning Herald, by the name of Vaso Julic, who was arrested last month. Police say that, and I'm quoting from the Herald here, the sometime vigneron, the winemaker, was passionate about cultivating a different industry, the Australian cocaine trade, and he wanted to bring in 2.5 tonnes of cocaine worth $7.5 billion. And Andrew, this became undone by a series of unfortunate events, which we'll get to. But first, I have to ask, that seems an awful lot. I mean, who are the rich people in this time of cost of living crisis who can afford that price for cocaine?
For cocaine? I don't know how much he's selling it per serve. We've got to, boil it down. What is it called? A snort of cocaine or a lick of cocaine or something like that? But the cost per snort is how high?
Per lick, like, you go and get a little lick of chocolate.
Well, I've never tried it, Donny. I don't know how it works. I'm like you say, I'm from Melbourne. I haven't even heard of this stuff.
No, and I'm far too boring to have tried it. So we've got the wrong people in a sense, but we can also be objective because I don't want to cast aspersions on Charles, but listen to any of the episodes, and there are many of the Chaser Report involving cocaine, and Charles would be quite sad if he were here at the loss of all of this material. Of course, that's a humorous conceit.
It too, have they?
Yeah, well, I think it's gone up in smoke. It literally has gone up in smoke. We'll get onto that. But yes, I mean, Charles, of course, talks about drugs as an ironic persona that he's playing. No one should rate him.
Yes, I'm sure he knows nothing of those things.
Particularly at these prices, I think it's fair to say he's not having any. But look, I don't know. I mean, all I know, Andrew, is that the times I've been out with people who seem to have been on cocaine a very long time ago, they were incredibly annoying. Why would you pay so much money to transform yourself into an arsehole?
Well, look, I think the same could be said, Dommy, of a drunk person, couldn't it? Or even a person who's had a good meal. I mean, somebody who's eaten well.
A gourmet.
Can be quite annoying.
That's true. That's actually very true.
Yeah, if you think about, celebrity chefs, they're pretty irritating, aren't they? And very smug, self-satisfied sort of people. So I wouldn't necessarily, pigeonhole these cocaine users as being uniquely annoying.
No, perhaps it's just like a very, very satisfying croquembouche or something. I don't know. Can you snort a croquembouche? Maybe you can.
Well, it depends if this... Look, I don't know. Is there a croquembouche smuggler as well as this guy?
That would
I don't
be
know.
great.
What interests me that he was a vigneron. But when they say that, which country was he operating his vineyards out of?
Okay, so this is a gentleman who apparently the story begins in Podgorica, Montenegro, where, says the Herald, Vaso Julich's son Nikola and up to 10 others planned the alleged importation of 2.5 tons of South American cocaine. So they're in Montenegro. The concept was, so they had this plan, and the authorities in Montenegro have documents that the Herald's obtained on this. And apparently the money came from Canary Island bank accounts. The cocaine was coming from Colombia to be processed in Ecuador, then to travel through European ports and onto the deep waters off New South Wales. So a truly global supply chain. Pretty impressive. It's like a computer or a sports car or something.
Oh, look, I reckon a lot of coke snorters would be pretty concerned about the carbon footprint there, Dommy, because it's a lot of, we talk about food miles, but that's a lot of snort miles. And I think, I think in Australia, I'd like to think that our cokeheads would value local produce, something that's been manufactured nearby.
That's true.
An artisanal product.
Yeah, single origin.
Maybe a single origin bean. Where does cocaine come from? The coca, coca bean,
coca leaf or something. I think yes. Wouldn't you want to be able to go and talk to the growers and hear their stories?
I think so.
Of growing coca leaf and how lovely. Because you'd want to be fair trade, wouldn't you? As far as I understand, Andrew, there's not enough fair trade in the coke industry.
No, there should be fair trade. In fact, it should be like packaged nicely too, Dommy.
Yes.
In a nice little recycled cardboard package with a photo
of the grower,
a photo of the farmer's
and a signature,
face.
a little signature.
The person who made it, the brewers. Or do you brew cocaine? What do you do? The cooker's face should be on the packet.
Well, it's quite bizarre. So they grow it in Colombia. Apparently, you can't process it there. You've got to cook it up in Ecuador. Now, I read that wonderful book Marching Powder by Rusty Young, and apparently the best cocaine in the world is found in the prison where he used to go and sleep the night. It's somewhere in an underground laboratory.
That's where you go.
You get the best cocaine. So
you have to go to a prison.
Noting
to
that,
get the best stuff.
It's a great read. I really recommend it. It's fascinating.
It's a bit late if you're in a prison to get the best cocaine.
Apparently, that's where you get it. They really know their stuff, given that they're serving life sentences.
Regret getting that far? I mean, sure, you might have the good stuff, but
you're
in prison.
It goes to Ecuador. What confuses me is what was happening in Europe. Why would it need to even go to the Northern Hemisphere? But apparently that was the idea. But then anyway, eventually it was going to make it onto a fishing boat coming down here. And there were some very clever details. The way that they identified each other was that they were given particular banknotes to show each other, and they'd been texted the serial number of the banknote to look for to prove that they were legit. So they had code names like Robin Hood, Duran Duran, and AC/DC.
God, it's lucky that the actual Duran Duran were not on that flight. That could have been a very confusing and worrying thing for Duran Duran.
And the plan was that they'd rented two storage units in Lake Macquarie where they were going to keep it and send it out from there. And the package of cocaine, there was a symbol stamped on it, a rooster or a four-leaf clover or a horseshoe or something, saying what was going on. But there was a problem, Andrew. And this is the thing, if you are involved in a global cocaine conspiracy, just a note to you and anyone else listening who's interested in this business. You don't want to use a clandestine underworld app that's been set up by the FBI because they were part of this famous Anom scam. Do you remember the Anom scam where everyone had been using this app to kind of criminal WhatsApp, and the FBI ran it and got all the info?
You got to hand it to the FBI on that one, Dommy. That's extraordinary. Is it a well reviewed and popular app? This one,
not anymore. I think it's really dropped in the App Store charts.
I can imagine the ratings would be fairly low after the Duran Duran people, posted their opinions.
That's right. Ironically, if they'd used actual WhatsApp, they would have been absolutely fine. You can't. It's sort of end-to-end encrypted. Plus, you'd be in a criminal conspiracy with Mark Zuckerberg, who's probably worse than any of these. Anyway, so a lot went wrong, Andrew. I'm going to tell you about some of the things that went wrong after this.
Yes, please.
The Chaser Report. News a few days after it happens.
So given that the FBI got in, they managed to grab the packages, the original packages, and swap it out for harmless white powder. Now, presumably the Colombian police disposed of the original cocaine. And
I suppose they disposed of it. They'd be known for that, wouldn't they?
Absolutely. So then what happened was it went into a boat and...
The fake stuff.
The fake stuff got put... Yeah, I assume that the proper stuff was resold for a profit for the police. Traditionally.
What do they use for the fake stuff? What is it? Do you know? Is it
flour or... Yeah, it could be. Or, I'm not sure what it is. Baking soda? I don't know. And so what happened was the boat went off from South America on its way, and a plane flew overhead, and the crew panicked and set the vessel on fire, and it turned into an absolutely huge fireball. They've got an aerial photo of it here, and it's not good. The entire ship is basically a giant fireball in the middle of the ocean.
I would have thought, like, for somebody to make that decision, you'd imagine that they were just coked off their nips at the time. You know, they would have been using the product, but they couldn't have been, because unless it was the placebo effect, because all
that's
that
what I'm thinking it was
fake. It was all fake.
I think they were pretending, like they just sort of go, "Oh, I'm so jacked," or whatever the Spanish
really,
version.
they were quite stone cold sober when they made the decision to just set the boat alight.
I mean, I remember going to a karaoke once where I was the only person not using that, and I mean, everyone else was basically spraying champagne on the ceiling and on the walls. So I had to as well. I had to, just to fit in, not to be judged.
Oh, you had to, yes.
Yeah.
Well, you would, you wouldn't want to be left out.
But I mean,
Duran Duran and AC/DC.
That's right. But imagine if it had actually been cocaine, the tiniest sniff of the fire presumably would have completely
The
destroyed
chopper
them.
pilot would have had a great time. Would have been very confident going in to save those people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what happened to AC/DC and Duran Duran after this fire?
So then another boat apparently was overloaded. They put too much on a boat, so it wasn't allowed to leave the dock in Ecuador because it was overloaded. Then COVID happened, and syndicate members couldn't get down. The Panama Canal was shut. You remember when it was blocked? They couldn't send it through Europe. So then they had to go via the Cape Horn to try and do it. The team in Sydney were arrested and remained before the courts. I don't know whether any of them are AC/DC. I presume some of them are. And then there was another interception where the US Coast Guard replaced the cocaine with an inert substance. So to charge them with trafficking cocaine seems a bit unfair when it seems as though they didn't actually manage to do any of it.
No, you're right. They were just bringing in baking powder. I don't think that's an offence, is it?
Absolutely.
Not. This could be a huge boon for the bakers of Sydney, I imagine, when all this stuff. Are they distributing the flour or the baking powder, I hope,
well, I mean,
to needy bakers?
Imagine how the delight of the bakers, even beyond the bakers, delight bakers in the ads.
I can't imagine.
They'd be very, very happy.
Just imagine the delight of bakers.
So this
bakers
guy,
are known for their delight. Bakers are famously delighted, aren't they?
To get up at 3 a.m.
Delighted people.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of white powder around a bakery, isn't there?
There is a lot, and a lot of delight, and they're up at 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
You know, they're
powering
very driven,
through.
very confident and driven people.
Very long hours, they do. So this guy, Ulich, apparently allegedly was part of the Sydney underworld before. He worked on the Golden Mile and King's Cross, did all that sort of stuff. And he went back to the Balkans. He retired to Montenegro, and he had a vineyard.
He retired?
There. Yeah,
so
to his hometown. Went back home. Well, he's now Albanian, actually. But he had a vineyard cultivated with grapes from South Australia. And the great news is that Montenegro doesn't have an extradition treaty with Australia. So I'm not sure what's going to happen now that they've arrested him. But anyway, so it's an awful lot of cocaine to literally burn on the ocean or to just lose because it was too heavy.
It's one of the great goofball stories of the year, this one, I think. And, fantastic business story too.
Well, I think the point of the matter is don't use encrypted apps. If you wanted to, exchange information, just hide it in plain sight in a podcast.
I think so. Yeah. Launch a podcast.
That's right. So speaking of which, Andrew, can you ensure that the thing is processed and delivered appropriately as we've discussed, and you show the banknote that with the serial number 0003525.
If anybody used bloody cash nowadays, Dommy, I'd be happy to waggle a banknote around. But I feel there was another fatal flaw in the plan.
That's true, actually.
How sus is it that people are waving banknotes?
Yes.
And nobody has a banknote
You have
anymore.
to exchange
know what one
credit
looks
card
like.
details on your phone. You have to
No.
tap to identify yourself. There you go.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, what else could they have waggled around at each other? Like a fob watch or something? I mean,
Yeah,
what
Unisight,
other obsolete
a penny
item?
farthing.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Here's what we'll do, guys. We'll ride out on our penny farthings. And that way we'll be able to spot each other.
Yeah,
at the
with
airport.
a cutthroat razor in time, in case anyone tries to attack us. So, I mean, I guess it's quite a funny story that they were so inept and that the pandemic it's just so much money up in smoke. But I worry for the cocaine users of Sydney, Andrew. It's a town that, when you grew up here, you know that if you're completely sober, it's a harrowing place to be, isn't it?
It's an awful place to be. I know.
You
I
gotta
know.
look at the property prices. Sober.
I think it's just, yeah. I'm very worried about it. It's just another pressure that Sydney people deserve not to face, not having any coke to snort right up their nostrils every morning for breakfast.
What are the tourists to do? In
That's
the
the
city,
only reason anybody
you
would
can't go
visit
out.
Sydney.
The whole
No.
point of a night out in Sydney, the reason why all the bars close early is because there's nothing to do. So you just go home, and by that stage, you're so drug fucked you don't care.
Well, you only go to Sydney, for the drugs. I mean, this is like visiting the Champagne region in France and discovering that it has no champagne.
That's right.
I mean, it's a terrible.
Or
terrible
Amsterdam being sort of weed free would be very depressing. Oh, that's very sad. Instead, you just go to Montenegro and find a little vineyard and
Yeah, track down Mr. What's his name again?
ACDC.
Sorry?
Oh, I don't know what his name was, but yeah. Allegedly, this Ulich fellow. So there you go. The most shocking thing to me, Andrew, is that anyone caught drug dealers. From what I've seen, they never get caught.
Yeah, well, but I imagine most of them are a tiny bit more competent than these boat immolating drug dealers that you've described from Montenegro.
So yes, there's some useful business tips, I think, for all of us. There, check the apps that you're using and
Check the apps. Check the
come up
apps.
with less embarrassing pseudonyms than Duran Duran.
I think so. And if you're running a lovely vineyard in Montenegro, maybe just stick to that.
Yes, indeed. Gears from Road, we're part of the Iconoclast Network. We'll see you next time.
See you.